Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Multiple ways you to interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You could also reach out to us on social media, hashtag Giants Chat. He is at GiantsWFAN. I am at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. A reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast as we welcome you into the Giants podcast studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So we have reached the initial finish line, Paul. Minicamp wrapping up earlier today, so we will recap what transpired on day 2, as now the team will break away for a little bit, a little R&R for the players and the coaching staff before all of a sudden the start of training camp, most likely the latter part of July. And this is by far, okay, and I know most of our audience understands this, the toughest next 30 days that Paul Dottino has to digest, experience. I mean, you need to really paint the picture of what your life is like over the next month.
Pain.
And suffering?
Yes.
Okay. I want to, once again,
this
vivid
is hard.
picture.
This is hard for me.
We feel for you.
It is the abyss until, as Brian Dable said, they will begin camp on July 22nd. He made that announcement today.
And you're counting the minutes and the seconds.
June 18th.
So you got a little over a month. At
least the watch is moving, which means we're getting closer and closer to coming back again.
How about that? That's a positive spin.
This is the Bermuda Triangle for me. I don't enjoy this month or so. It stinks, actually. But it is what it is. You can't expect the guys to be working 12 months out of the year. That's a little much on their bodies, too much physical exertion.
Everybody needs off.
And so the good news, though, folks, okay, remember now, the office is closed on Thursday, Juneteenth. A lot of folks are closed around the country.
Yep.
And we will be closed, so there'll be no program here. There will be a WFAN program Thursday night at 10 p.m. I juggled my dates a little bit. There will be John Schmelk and I are going to do a minicamp wrap-up show tomorrow night at 10 p.m. on WFAN here in New York, 101.9 FM and 66 AM. We will come back with Big Blue Kickoff Live at its regular time on 12:30 on Friday. And then we will be here all next week at our regular 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time start with Big Blue Kickoff Live. So at least I have the program and you to get me through this very difficult time. I can only imagine it's got to be 10 times worse than Aaron Rodgers in the dark room. I
can't envision you in a dark cave anyway. So,
well,
you would drive yourself nuts in utter darkness. There's no way that you'd be able to survive as long as he did.
You're right.
No way.
But there's utter darkness. There's utter darkness emotionally because there's nothing. For the next month, there's nothing. This is emotional darkness.
Sure.
This is the hole inside my spirit.
Well, the good news is for the next 60 minutes, we will be able to talk some football.
Yes, we will.
So we'll be able to delay the darkness for you. And
I'm so glad.
I could tell. While we're on topic, actually, one of the things that I wanted to start with, I thought was interesting. Brian Dable was asked about, at the end of a season, there are always meetings between the coaches and the players, right? Before they break for the few months, and then all of a sudden you have the start of spring workouts and OTAs. But one of the things that Dave's brought up was that they meet before the spring even starts with the individual players, specifically the positional coaches, and they set out, okay, during the spring, this is what we want you to focus on.
Yes.
This is the facet of your game that needs to be tweaked. And then he said, now that minicamp is wrapping up and they're going to break for a little bit, they would have another meeting around this time to say, okay, this is what you worked on during the spring. This is what we saw on film during the workouts. This is what you should be focusing on for the next 30 days before you then return for training camp. So I think the way we always talk about the NFL is it's cyclical. There's a calendar, there's a breakdown, but you don't hear enough about coaching staffs talk about the conversations as they break for these next 30 days other than, Paul, don't do anything I wouldn't do. Make sure you don't steal headlines right off the field. That's always the emphasis. But I think what we don't talk enough about is there is still a focus on, okay, use these 30 days, yes, to get away from football, but that doesn't mean that you can't try to fine-tune some of the things so that you're ready to go come day one of training camp.
Well, Brian Dable was very clear in his underlying message, and that is, yes, be safe. Don't do anything that will embarrass the organization or your teammates or anything of that sort. But he also said, we've established a framework here over the last several months of discipline, of understanding of what it is you're supposed to do on the field, the mental reps that you took, the homework that you underwent and you got done. And don't lose focus and don't lose track of that. Yes, take some time off, for sure. You get the time off as required by the league CBA, but don't get off track. Do retain some of what you learned the last couple of months, because when we get to training camp, he was very clear about this. We get to training camp, you got to be ready to go because the season's right around the corner, and you can't waste too much time trying to ramp up again.
Because you don't want to go backwards. You want to surge ahead and build off of what you at least established here during the course of the spring. So that was one of the interesting nuggets that at least came out of the conversation from Brian Dable. We heard a few players speak to the media after practice, and we heard from the other half of the quarterback room. The other day we heard from Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. So today was about Jaxson Dart and Tommy DeVito. And the main takeaway that at least I get from just listening to all the quarterbacks, and I think it's evident based on, once again, the limited work on the field. There's only so much you can read into, but it is a very healthy quarterback room. Not to say that previous quarterback rooms, Paul, were detrimental to the team. I don't want people to misinterpret, but you could just tell that there is the competitive fire within the group, but there's also a genuine likeness amongst all of them. And even Tommy DeVito and Jaxson Dart spoke of the vets. They take the younger guys out for dinner. They interact a lot.
And they pay,
out
too.
Of the football. Well, I would hope. If you're Tommy DeVito and Jaxson Dart, I would hope that Russ and Winston would pick up the bill. This is not their first rodeo, first contract when it comes to the league.
I believe Tommy said they're well off.
Yes, that was the exact phrase that he utilized. Correct. But he also joked that there is a big age disparity, though, somewhat within the group, right? Because you have the two veterans who are married, have families, whereas the two young guys are out and about and so forth. But despite the differences, whether it be from a financial perspective or from an experience perspective, there still seems to be a really strong bond amongst the group.
There is.
And I take that away as I'm sure the coaching staff would tell you, specifically Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, and Shea Tierney, that, you know, that's something that should be able to help everybody, even the old guys learning from the young guys, vice versa, as opposed to the stream going the opposite direction.
I don't know if you're going to agree with this, but I think part of the reason that environment has developed is because the Giants front office and coaching staff clearly defined the roles for each one of these four quarterbacks from the very beginning. When they signed Winston, he was told, it's a 2-year contract, and you're the number 2. He wasn't brought in here to be the number 1. He was brought in to be the 2, and he was told that. And, oh, by the way, there's a real good chance that we might wind up getting one in the draft, too. So understand, you'll be the 2. When they brought in Russell Wilson, it was clear, you're coming here to be the starter. And it's a 1-year contract.
Sure.
So understand that unless circumstances change, you're here to start. Yes, we want you to win as many games as you can, but you're also going to help mentor the guy who eventually is supposed to be your successor. There were no facades here. There were no curtains or mystery agendas. They were very clear up front with each of these guys. This is what your role is on the team. When Tommy DeVito, came back this year, he was restricted. He was going to be here anyway. He comes back, and he understood what happened. He saw they signed Winston. He saw they signed Wilson. He knew there was a chance they were going to draft a rookie. And what did he say to us today? I'm not worried about my position in the room. I'm trying to do everything I can to be here as long as I can possibly be here, and then it'll play out as it plays out. What a healthy attitude. You don't have anybody in that room who is confused about what their role is. And what is the other role that Tommy DeVito has? It was explained to everybody from the beginning. Tommy, you've been here for 2 years already. You know the playbook. You know what Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, and Shea Tierney want. Part of what your job is going to be this offseason is to acclimate those new guys as we bring them in into the Giants' way. He embraced it. Okay, fine. That's what I'll do. And we'll just see how it plays out. Tommy DeVito knows he's good enough to play in the NFL. He does, Lance. There's no doubt he knows it. He's won games in this league before under very difficult circumstances. He knows that if the Giants don't have room for him and they have to waive him at the 53, which in all likelihood is the most plausible scenario,
Sure.
he's going to have a job because he's either going to get picked up by somebody else off of waivers, because there is no doubt he is one of the best number 3 quarterbacks. You want to call him a number 3, which is what I think he is, a very good number 3 quarterback. And about half the teams in this league are going to keep 3. I'll tell you right now, I think the Jets would have an upgrade. If Tommy DeVito were brought down there, he'd be an upgrade for their number 3. I'll tell you that right now, hands down. So he knows he's going to get a job in this league. And if he doesn't get claimed,
He'll come
guess
back to
what?
the practice squad.
He'll stay here. The Giants will keep him. Brian Dable's not going to kick him out on the street. So I just think that having clearly defined roles for each of these guys and each of those men understanding but also being okay with the instructions has allowed the room to really kind of gel and bond and have fun. As Tommy said, it's a fun room. Every one of these quarterbacks talk about how much they admire each other and they've learned something from each of the other guys, and they're enjoying themselves. I give credit to the front office and the coaching staff for setting up the climate to make that happen.
But that's critical to your point, because there's a lot of times where you have 3 or 4 guys in a quarterback room and it's presented as, okay, this is an open competition, and the lines are blurred.
What do you think's going on in the Cleveland quarterback room?
Well, that's another good example. Yeah, because there's so many different quarterbacks on different wavelengths and periods of their career, and really not a defined, legitimate starter. Is it Kenny Pickett? Is it Joe Flacco? You know, who's even in the number 1 seat before you then get to the rookies that they just drafted. So the dynamics are very different. But I want to highlight what you were talking about with respect to Tommy DeVito. I don't want to say he has a luxury, because that's misleading. You can't take your spot for granted. But I do think his mindset is in a healthy place, because I think he feels good about his outlook, even if he doesn't make the 53-man roster for the Giants, because he understands, okay, this team values my knowledge of the offense, and there's a spot for me within the organization, even if, once again, I'm a member of the practice squad. The best case scenario would be, okay, you don't make the Giants roster, you make another team's 53, right? He'd welcome that.
Sure.
But the worst case scenario is really not a worst case scenario for you,
because
you
stays.
could revert back to the team that helped develop you.
Tommy DeVito is going to be a part of the NFL one way or the other this season. I feel very comfortable saying that. I don't think he is going to be out of a job.
But I think the most attractive aspect of that with respect to job security is you've got at least the fallback option here with the Giants. And I'm not saying it's locked, and I'm not saying that any promises were made to Tommy DeVito, okay? Paul and I are still speculating at the same time.
No doubt.
Make that clear, okay? There is no definitiveness, but I think if you connect the dots and how much they value him and what he brings to the team, it's not a stretch to say he could very well find himself back in the fold on the practice squad. And not many 4th or 5th quarterbacks who are in camp can say that they have that as a legitimate option.
Well, because usually the guys in that spot are either eager to get a change of scenery, to try to get another opportunity somewhere else, thinking it'll be a better chance in terms of a promotion, or quite honestly, maybe they're not as giving and as cooperative. I mean, Tommy DeVito's willingness to share, willingness to teach, willingness to help the rest of the room, that says a lot about his character. And it says a lot about the Giants that they would want him around to do that. Because, look, Lance, they knew what they were going to do with this offseason quarterback room. They could have very easily said, Tommy, you're not going to fit here. We don't think it's a good dynamic to even have you in the room because, maybe you probably have higher aspirations and we don't think it'll mesh well with what we're trying to build.
And we want a fresh slate.
They could have got rid of him.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They trusted him enough and they like him enough as a person, as a player, as a teammate, that they wanted him here.
The other thing that I picked up on that Tommy mentioned, he was asked about the relationships, the dynamics, and by the way, a side note, how many times do you think Russell Wilson in conversation with Jaxson Dart and Tommy DeVito, the sentence starts, when I was younger and I watched you on television, how many times do you think that phrase comes up? And I wonder whether or not Russ, he probably chuckles, but it's got to wear on you at a point where you start feeling old, no? When you're sharing a quarterback room with a kid that was, 5 or 6 years old when you started out playing football? I mean, it's got to, and I'm not even talking about the NFL, because the way I'm going to circle this back around is DeVito said the other way that he relates to Russell Wilson is not just seeing him in the Super Bowl when it was at MetLife Stadium and complaining about the roads were shut down. He talked about
he said the
that's
traffic
actually
was
what
terrible.
irritated him the most of all things. But I thought the other thing that was appealing was Tommy mentioned the reason why I also relate to Russell Wilson is, like him, I transferred in college.
Yes.
Did you hear that? And that I thought was, something that I didn't necessarily think about on the surface, but he said, I saw a guy that went to multiple programs, and, Russell Wilson was at NC State, then went to Wisconsin, and then Tommy DeVito was at Syracuse, went to Illinois, and I thought that was something that doesn't get brought up enough about, that you can see what Russell did in navigating his career before he even made it to the NFL. And I'm not saying that they are following equivalent scripts. Clearly they're not. But maybe Tommy realized, okay, Russ made that decision. It worked out well for him. So that's why I figured I can take the risk and roll the dice.
So did Jaxson Dart.
Sure, Dart as well. No doubt about it. But I guess Tommy's maybe seen it through some different lenses because he's been in the NFL. So that's why I thought maybe they could relate to one another a little bit more, maybe more so than Dart at this point.
Look, the only thing that I'd want to say from a forest perspective, let's take a step back from the trees just a tad, is that as the Giants break camp today and they send the coaches and the players off for their summer hiatus, there's a really good vibe right now. Guys feel like they've put in a good spring of work. They feel like they've gotten a lot accomplished. They feel like they have really started to bond and gel together. They feel unified. And there's a tremendous amount of optimism. Now, it does not automatically translate to victories. You and I talked about this when we were at practice today.
We had this exact conversation.
It does not automatically translate. But to check those boxes is better than to leave them empty. And really, that's as simple as it is right now. You don't want to overplay what has happened, but you do need to recognize it.
Well, speaking of outlook, a few other things that I want to bring up, takeaways from media sessions. We also had an opportunity to listen to the defensive assistant speak to the media, and clearly optimism, a big theme, which is natural this time of the year. And there's only so much you could take away from production, even through their lens. But when Charlie Bullen spoke to the media, and he is the Giants outside linebackers coach, he was focusing on, of course, Abdul Carter. And one of the questions that came up, Paul, was, from your time in the league, from studying NFL talent, are there players that you can maybe throw out just as a mere comparison to Abdul Carter, not in terms of what he's going to become, but his skill set? And he threw out two names that clearly will be notable to our audience. One was Hassan Reddick, who the Giants have seen up close and personal when he was with the Eagles.
Many times, actually with the Cardinals, too.
Correct.
He punished the Giants.
And Hassan Reddick's teammate in Arizona for a little bit, Chandler Jones. Those were the two players that he threw out. And the character trait that he was highlighting is the length. Chandler Jones, lengthy player. But Reddick was not known as being a big guy every time he was on the football field, but still had a knack for powering his way to the quarterback. So that's why he brought up both of those players in terms of who comes to mind with respect to Abdul Carter. And that's pretty high praise, okay, before Abdul Carter, right, even steps on the field. I mean, he didn't bring up complimentary guys. He brought up two premier pass rushers in their own right. Now, Bullen has spent 12 years in the NFL, so he's seen his fair share of players on a variety of different teams, and it was interesting to just once again get his perspective on that. The other thing that he threw out was he was asked, because the assistants do a lot of heavy lifting in scouting these players in addition to the scouting department, and he was specifically asked, was there a moment when you knew Abdul Carter was going to be the guy at pick 3, or that you said to yourself, there's no doubt if he's available, they should absolutely go after him? And he said, I want to say, I think he threw out like January 18th as a date. Like he had it specifically down to a T. And he mentioned it was one of his kids' birthdays. So, that's why he remembers that day vividly. But clearly, Carter, through the draft process, before he even got an opportunity to coach him, left a very strong impression on members of the coaching staff, specifically Bullen.
Well, he said the thing about Carter that stands out, he said that the best pass rushers, the guys who are really natural at it, it's more about their mentality than their traits. He said you have to have the skills. You do need the traits, but the mentality is what sends them over the top. And he said particularly about Carter, his nastiness and his grit and his desire to finish the play. Those are the things that make him special and allow him to raise his level of play another notch. And then I thought the other thing that was interesting, I talked to Andre Patterson, the defensive line coach, who, as you know, has also specialized in teaching pass rushers.
Yep, when he was with Minnesota specifically.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And in talking to him about Carter, let me give you something here, because he said he's going to work with him in third down situations. Bullen loses Carter, and he's got to go to Patterson, and Patterson works with him a little bit too. He said, look, he's explosive, he's quick, and he's sudden. But the thing that he likes about him, and it's pretty good when you have two coaches who say they have two different things that are so elite that make the guy special. That's a plethora of skills. He says his natural ability to win at the top of the rush is what makes him special. Very few have it, and a lot of guys, it takes them 2 to 3 years to learn it. He said, as soon as I saw this guy, I knew he had it. And by the top of the rush, we're talking about when you make your initial move and you get past your blocker, could be a tight end, could be a tackle, could be a running back. You get past your tackle, and now the top of the rush is where you actually make the bend. You make the turn, and you actually make that move to finish off the quarterback. You make that geometric angle that, boom, now I got him. I'll be frank with you. For me, I've been impressed with his quickness and his fluidity. I said yesterday on the show, I think it was yesterday, that you see the movie Terminator 2?
Sure.
And the guy, the bad guy, who is the, silver liquid bad guy. And then he turns
into different forms.
He turns into the policeman. He's the bad guy.
Correct.
Abdul Carter reminds me of the silver liquid guy in Terminator 2.
Okay.
Because of his incredible fluidity. He's so fast and so smooth when he makes his moves that it's almost like, does he have joints? And look, we've seen dancers, the Shakira, the pop star.
Okay, wow, I did not expect
right?
That. Terminator 2 and Shakira in the same show?
The moves that woman makes.
You're the one transforming.
No, but the moves that woman makes, right?
Yes.
She does these moves that are like, wow, look at that. That
she's got rhythm.
No doubt.
Yes.
Okay, so Abdul Carter has this innate ability to make moves that look like they should be difficult or should at least be slower than they are, and he just glides right through them with 5 cans of oil. Just does it effortlessly. And that's what I see in Abdul Carter. But, these guys have coached it a long time, and they see these other things that are even more special. I can't wait to see this guy play a game for the Giants. I've seen his tape at Penn State. I can't wait to see him play here.
Well, following your theme, eventually it will be Judgment Day for Abdul Carter.
That's very good.
Thank you. I'm here all week. Well, maybe not, but you get the point. Robert Patrick, by the way, the actor that played the shapeshifter in Terminator 2.
Was that his name,
Yes.
the shapeshifter?
Well, that's how I would describe, for somebody that has not seen the film, I mean, that's essentially, they describe it, I brought it up online, an advanced shape-shifting prototype Terminator composed of liquid metal. The T-1000 was the specific model.
The T-1000?
Yes. So maybe that's a potential nickname for Abdul Carter.
Wow.
The T-1000. Maybe keep that in the back burner. Depending on how things pan out, maybe it could be fitting.
That's
for
very
him.
interesting.
Yeah.
We might have to
Well, we're going to
sock
mark that
away.
down. June 18th, near 2:30 p.m. Eastern, we may have adopted a new nickname for Abdul Carter. We'll get back to you. Keep that on the back burner.
Yes, sir.
Yes. But in all seriousness, getting back to Andre Patterson, and we spoke to him. He came in very late.
He did.
It was like a last second, but he said a lot of good things. When he was talking, I was also, that's why I brought up the Vikings, because he's had the luxury of coaching a lot of good guys, and I think they're different players, but if you look at the trajectory of Daniil Hunter when he was a young guy, now Hunter was a later pick than Abdul Carter, okay? We're talking about a third rounder, but if they can get what they got out of Hunter in Minnesota, I don't think anybody would be complaining with respect to this building.
No, not at all.
Because that turned out to be a very good pick and an even better pro under the circumstances. Speaking of development, the other thing that was interesting to hear was Jermaine Illuminor spoke to the media, and Evan Neal came up. And Illuminor's a good guy to hear from because he's played guard and tackle. So,
and he's also very open and honest.
Correct.
Very frank with his opinions. He doesn't pull back.
100%. But it's always good to hear from an individual that's been there and done that, I guess is my point. You know, if they were talking to Andrew Thomas, not to say that but Thomas is more of a tackle guy, okay? Illuminor can relate to what Evan Neal is going through. And Illuminor even mentioned when he came to the Giants, you know, moving to a different position and how even when you go from right tackle to left tackle, vice versa, that's no picnic. He was saying that in order to play guard in this system, and you add whatever you thought was even more fascinating, he said you got to be a smart player in this offense. That was specifically, before he even talked about leg work and footwork and hand placement and whether or not your length can backfire on you, a tall guy like Evan Neal. He mentioned you got to have it up here, as I point to my head. And I think it says a lot about what's on the plate of guards within this system.
He mentioned two other huge factors in making the transition. Besides that, he said you have to have patience, because there's a different level of patience to play guard and there is to play tackle because of the speed at which the moves are made against you and how you have to play off the snap.
Yep.
That was a very, very critical point to him. And then the other one, which he emphasized 3 times, he says you have to have the want to, the desire to be able to make the switch, because if you don't, it's going to be even more difficult for you. And he said that Evan Neal has embraced it. He's listening to the coaches. He's absorbing it. And he wants to be a successful guard.
You brought up the term patience, but at the same time, Illuminor also said the decision-making occurs so much faster on the interior than the exterior, because one of the things he mentioned is you're going up against a guy like Dex. You're not going up against a Brian Burns or an Abdul Carter. So the power, bang, comes right at you. Well, and you have to be able to react a little bit differently than maybe the split second or so that you have when you have more room to operate off of the edge.
Well, the patience level is, again, that's what he said, because, for example, and he didn't use this, but it builds off of what you just said. If you're playing tackle and you're facing a wide 9 technique, you've got a split second more to decide what your move is going to be, how you're going to set up, what your counter might be, because they're playing a wide 9.
Sure.
When you're playing guard, there's somebody right there breathing right up your nostrils.
Right on top of you.
I mean, there's no time. The ball is snapped, and immediately you've got to have your move. There's no delay in making your decision. You need to know what you're going to do. So that's why he said there's a patience adjustment whether you're playing guard or tackle. It's a component that a lot of people don't even think about.
But I guess not to say that you were off key, but I just wanted to clarify the patience term, because I guess when I hear patience, or maybe some other individuals, they think, oh, patience, you have the luxury to wait, watch, and see.
No.
He
Between the two positions,
correct.
There's a difference, is what he was saying.
Yeah, meaning the internal clock
correct.
is sped up immensely when we're talking about the interior. And listen, you and I have had conversations on this very program about Evan Neal, and it's the combination of the power and just the size of the interior defensive lineman that he's going to see. And also just, once again, when you're a tall player like Evan Neal and you're in a tighter space, where is your comfort level in terms of your positioning? Can you operate when you have lack of space? A lot of people have been bringing up, oh, well, this is great. Evan's got more guys next to him that he could rely on. Well, they also have their own assignments. Let's not forget about that. Okay, they're not all of a sudden dropping everything, and Andrew Thomas is not going to say, oh, well, the hell with the edge rusher. I can worry about who Evan Neal has to pick up. And John Michael Schmitz is like, well, I don't have to worry about the guy over the center. I can move over to my left.
Oh, man.
It doesn't work like that. So, that's the ebbs and flows in the game of chess, checkers, however you want to label it, that Evan Neal is going to have to go through. And while he now has the time to adjust from a mental standpoint, the true test is going to come in training camp when the pads come on, and now the physicality adjustment has to match wits with the mental part of the game. And that remains to be seen. But Illuminor at least brought his own philosophy, having been through scenarios where he has jumped back and forth. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here on Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Before we get there, just a reminder, with another impactful drafted free agency class in the books, that means it's full steam ahead to the 2025 season. You can take your fandom to the next level with a Giants season ticket membership. You can catch all the action at MetLife Stadium with an exciting home schedule on the horizon. With a membership, you will also stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days, with exclusive member access and benefits. To learn more about a New York Giants season ticket membership, you can visit giants.com/tickets. All right. Let's open up the lines and we check in. Let's go to Jacob in Birmingham to start here on BBKL. What's happening, Jacob? What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
And Jacob's in Binghamton. I'm sorry. I said Birmingham. Mind games to myself, yes.
Well, there's a lot of miles between those two
There is
places.
a lot, yes, and also many states. Yes, he is in New York. He's not in Alabama, just in case anybody is keeping tabs on his whereabouts.
If they get snow in Birmingham, it's an issue.
Yes, indeed. But with that being said, yes, Jake, we're doing very well. What's on your mind?
I just had like a kind of a bold prediction, but I'll start it off with I have high hopes for the season. I just hope that the injury bug that has kind of plagued us in previous years doesn't hit again.
I think everybody hopes that across the league. Go ahead, Jacob.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my prediction is somewhat bold. It kind of relies on us staying healthy. That's kind of why I mentioned that. But I have us going 3-3 in the division. And my basis on that is us sweeping Washington and stealing one from the Cowboys. I don't think we're at the level to compete with the Eagles just yet. And I have a feeling that Washington will take a fairly large step back this season with teams somewhat figuring out Jaden Daniels. We'll have to see. But that's my prediction, and I'll see what you guys have to say off of it.
All right, Jacob. Appreciate the phone call.
Won't take long to find out if he's right.
Well, they've got Washington and Dallas right off the bat. Yeah, absolutely.
Really? Look, I agree that Washington will likely take a step back. I do think having a full off season of tape on the quarterback is going to hinder them somewhat. How much of a step back, I don't know, because they certainly added some players on that team now. They did very well with their trades and their free agency. You know, maybe not so much in the draft, but they found a way to get some good guys onto that team.
And there's a lot more familiarity because, remember, that was year one for Dan Quinn and company.
I know.
So they're benefiting from that.
I don't know how far back they'll come, but I do think they'll slip a little bit. Is it enough for the Giants to take them? Look, the Giants battled them tough last year. It wasn't like they were outclassed. Unfortunately, they were outclassed when they played Philadelphia. So I don't think your logic is so far off base that it can't happen.
No, well, I will say this: 3-3 is the minimum if you want to remain competitive within the division.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't afford to go lower than that. And I just brought up the standings from last season just out of curiosity. Who that went 3-3 in the division actually still wound up not winning the division, but making the playoffs. And the only team that fit that bill, which is not a surprise given how tough this division is, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Right.
They went 3-3 in the division, but here's the thing: they went 10-7 overall. So you do the math, okay? They had 7 wins outside of the division. See, remember when we went to the 17-game slate, we've had these conversations. I don't want to say it's diminished the value of divisional play. That would be misleading because you still need that from a tiebreaker perspective, but it also put more of an emphasis on you still got to take care of business outside of the division. You could go 6-0 in the division. You lose all your other games. What difference does it make? But the difference is the Steelers, and this is why I'm highlighting Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh still had a very respectable record despite a 500 mark within the division. And I'm just finishing scrolling through. I wanted to see the rest of the NFC, and nobody at 3-3 made the playoffs in the NFC. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, the lone team, and just as a means of, let's go back one more year, Paul, just as a means of comparison to have a slightly bigger sample size. In 2023, let's see if anyone, Baltimore won the division. Notice how we're coming back to the AFC North where they beat the living you-know-what out of everybody, each other. So the Ravens won the division. They were 3-3. They won 13 games overall. That means they had 10 wins outside of the division. Wow. Outside of Baltimore, as I continue to go down the list, nobody else. So the last 2 years, we have had one team in each season that has gone 3-3 within divisional play, and they both come out of the AFC North, which I think says a lot about the state of that division.
Yeah, it does for sure. Look, the bottom line is, Bill Parcells always used to tell us, and it was not a secret, and it's like, okay, listen, if you want the easiest pathway to make the playoffs, just win your division. Okay? Just win your division and split the rest of your games, and you'll have a really good chance to get in. Odds are heavily in your favor that you'll make the playoffs. But you got to win your division games. Okay? Of course, if you finish first and clinch the division title, you're automatically in. So that goes without saying. But it was about winning your division games. I mean, think about it. If you can go 4-2, again, winning the division. I'm not talking about the division title.
No, you're just talking about divisional games.
Winning record.
Right. Yeah,
winning record.
Sure.
If you're 4-2, all you've got to do is win 5 more games outside of the division. That's it. 5. You go 4-2. You win 5 games outside your division. Okay. Now that means you can lose 6 other games and still have a chance to get in. I mean, I get it. Of course, when Bill was coaching, it was only 16 games. But
correct. Well, the math was a little bit different, but the point is still well taken. And just in response to the last caller, which once again, I would agree with you, Paul. I don't think it's a major bold prediction, but there's one factor that's going to decide whether or not 3-3 is even feasible. And to me, it's more on the offense than the defense.
Sure.
Can you score against your divisional foes? Now, you could tell me, well, they had problems scoring against every team. But as I bring up last season, okay, you mentioned the Washington games were close. They were. Both games were decided by 5 points or less. Mm-hmm. But they scored 18 points in the first game. They scored 22 in the second. Paul, that's just not going to cut it when you're going up against, pretty good offenses within the division. Then you go to the Dallas games. 15 in the first game. Second game, 20. Okay, so that means they scored 20 or less in both games against the Cowboys. Then the Eagles, first game 3, second game 13. So 13 or less. That to me, and I'm not making it into simplistic terms, that's the reality. If you want to go 3-3 within divisional play, then minimum, you've got to prove that you can get within that 22 to 23 point barometer consistently. If you can't do that, then that makes 3-3 even that much more challenging.
Well, again, we talked about this many times. The last time the Giants made the playoffs in 2022, they averaged almost 23 points a game. I believe that was the number that year. That's a legitimate number. You could do something with your season if you can score that many points a game. But when you start getting down into the 20, 19, 18 range, I'm sorry, but your ship's taking on water.
Terminator, Shakira, boat analogies. Paul Dottino does not disappoint. Remember, we still have to cross off maybe a food item before we wrap up
it's
here,
coming.
people. Okay, see? I only build up the drama here on this program. Speaking of drama, let's head back to the phone lines. Let's check in with Cliff in New York here on BBKL. What's happening, Cliff? What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. Before I ask a question about Jaxson Dart, I wanted to say that even though our new number 3 draft pick is not a shapeshifter like Robert Patrick's character in the Terminators, you don't know, even though he's wearing the same uniform and has the same appearance, you don't know if he's coming at you as an inside linebacker, an interior defensive lineman, or an edge rusher. So he might as well be a shapeshifter.
That's it. Well, he'll certainly be moved around within the defense. That point is well taken. Yep.
Yeah. Let me run this by you about Dart. I kind of wasn't paying much attention to the quarterback situation running up to free agency and the draft because there seemed to be such a big consensus all across the expert world that outside of the guy who did get drafted number 1, there wasn't much to invest in. And I'm wondering if at that particular time, the Giants, Dable and his staff in particular, already had a wildly different perspective on Jaxson Dart, and that thought that they didn't have to wait for a quarterback class as good as the one last year, where the top 8 guys did very well, and it was just like something to learn from in there. That each team is doing their own scouting and their own research and their own evaluations. And even though the experts work their tails off to try to be informed for the fans, and I have a lot of respect for them, it seems like Jaxson was in the mind of the Giants as good as they could hope for.
They have said that multiple times in interviews over the last several months. They had Dart targeted very, very early in this process. Now, without them actually coming out and putting it in skywriter terms, if you piece together all of the different things that have been said by Dable and by the coaching staff and by Joe Shane, it's clear that, they did at least put in an inquiry to see if they could get the top pick with Tennessee, because Cam Ward was the consensus number 1 pick in this draft. And so I think it's fair to say that, he was the top quarterback on their board and almost everybody else's, if not all 32 teams. Having said that, it was also very obvious from all the pieces that you can piece together that the Giants felt all along Jaxson Dart was a very strong number 2. And they have done nothing to dispel that notion, because even Joe Shane, as we know his daughter, goes to Ole Miss, and he said he had been down there and he had seen him many, many times. I mean, this is a guy who, in the back of their minds, it's clear to me that if Ward wasn't going to fall to them in whatever spot they landed in this draft, it's clear to me that Dart was the next guy they were going to make an effort to try to nail.
And appreciate the phone call, Cliff. Thanks for giving us a ring. I would say this. Anytime you're concerned that if you don't move up, the player's not going to be on the board, I would say that tells you all you need to know about how they felt about Jaxson Dart, right? I mean, why would you give up resources to move up if you felt that he would probably maybe land if you just stayed put in the second round? But well, they didn't believe that.
We've heard of the nervousness in the room from some of the folks who have spoken publicly and said, they were getting down to the 20s, and, Joe's making phone calls, In fact, one of the interviews that I saw with Joe, he said, we had a deal with another team in the early 20s there, and it fell through.
Yeah.
And the Giants started to get worried, like, what if he doesn't keep falling? Are we going to be able to get him? And then finally, Houston came through by accepting a deal for pick 25.
Let's head back to the lines. We got Len in Columbia, Maryland here on BBKO. What's happening, Len?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Doing all right. What's on your mind?
Good. I just want to tell you, I've really enjoyed your conversation. I guess it's a couple of weeks now that all four of you were having on, how the Giants stacked up in the division by position.
Sure, the NFC East rankings.
Yeah, it was a really, really good conversation. Based on that conversation that you guys were having, would you be surprised if one team went 6-0 in the division, our division, and the other three teams went 2-4?
Well, I'd be surprised. I think Philly lost a lot of talent that maybe is not being discussed enough about on the defensive side of the ball. I still think they're good enough to perhaps pull off a 6-0 record, but if you were to ask me to classify it as surprising, given what they've lost, I'd be surprised. Yeah. I mean, 5-1, okay. I could see 4-2, but for somebody to go undefeated, I'd still be surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought the conversation was kind of leaning in that direction. I wasn't being critical. I just kind of read into it that that's really what you were talking about. That, when you look within the division, that I mean, the Eagles were overwhelmingly the best team in the division. But okay, thank you for clarifying that, Lance. Lance, another question: Are you somewhat surprised that they have moved Neal to left guard and essentially said, if behind Runyon, and I hope Runyon's healthy, but that they moved him to left guard and essentially said, if you're going to make this team, or if you want to start on this team, you got to beat out Runyon. I would have thought the right side, Evan might have had, the side that he came from, might have had a better chance. Greg Van Roten, he's on the back nine. I'm not sure how much more we're going to get out of him.
Len,
and then you got the undrafted free agent who they appear to be very high on there.
I think I need to stop you there, Len.
Maybe has a better chance to beat out Van Roten than Neal does?
Yeah, I think I need to stop you.
Are you surprised that they moved him to the left side?
Neal has worked both at left guard and right guard during the spring. He's worked out at both spots. He's taken more snaps at left guard because Runyon has missed most of the time there this spring.
Okay.
We understand that. He's been here, but he hasn't necessarily gone out on the field and taken team snaps. So because of that reason, there's more snaps available at left guard. So they've worked Neal more at left guard than right guard, but he has worked both sides. I was talking to Lance earlier this morning, and I said, Lance, there are six guards fighting for the two starting spots. And Neal's one of those six.
Who are the last two, Paul? Who are the last two?
Well, you have to consider Kubas is part of this mix. So is Stinney.
Right.
You've got the flex. Neal is part of the mix. You've got the flexibility with Bo, who is working primarily at tackle, but has the flexibility to move inside.
And then Azudu.
And Azudu, who is right now the jack of all trades and has worked at every position.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So and that's aside from the two guys who started last year in Van Roten and Runyon. So they got six guys.
Yeah, and Len, listen, before you jump back in, another thing that I just want to clarify is, remember, Evan Neal played left guard in college, and part of the mindset also was that, not to say that he can't, you're right, he's coming from the right side in terms of right tackle, just for our audience to understand, but they felt, and Carmen Brasillo even spoke about this the other day, that he at least had the comfort of being at guard on the left side in college, and they figured that was a good starting point because there was some comfort level there.
Okay, I would assume if you make it as a backup guard, you have to be able to play both sides.
Without a doubt, and that's why, to Paul's point,
they might carry four guards. Kind of an interesting thing on Stinney. When Stinney played last preseason, and it was a messy preseason for the offensive line, as you guys know. I remember it was awful. I mean, we were moving guys around, people were hurt, all that kind of thing. When Stinney played, I thought he was the best offensive lineman. I thought he was the best offensive lineman that got on the field. The guy was steady and really kind of did his job. He made the 53 and didn't get to play till the end when, again, the injury bug really hit us. But Stinnie's not a bad player. I thought that was a pretty good pickup. Paul, let's see. Or do I want to go to Lance first? There was something about.
Well, you could throw it out, both of us. Yes.
About Coach Patterson in talking about Carter. It seemed like he said Carter's in the edge room. Did you hear?
He's mostly working with Charlie Bullen.
He wasn't really a candidate right now.
No.
To be an inside linebacker.
Yeah, Bullen is the edge guy or the outside linebacker guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
He gets Carter now. He's got him exclusively now. He's got him all the time. But when they do certain situations, third down situations, that's when Andre Patterson said, I get to work with him on certain third down packages.
Okay.
But in the base defense, he's with Bullen.
They've done that with Thibodeau, too. When Thibodeau was drafted, he was a bit interchangeable in working with both rooms. Yeah.
Okay. Paul, I may have misread it, and you don't have to go back and research this because you're probably right. But when I read Patterson's comments about the top of the rush from Carter, I read it as Carter needs work on that part of the job, that he has the skill levels.
Totally.
Did I misread that?
Totally misread it.
Okay.
What Patterson basically said to us is that he can't believe how amazing Carter is at the top of the rush, coming right into the league. He doesn't need. He said most guys they need 2 or 3 years to learn it. He's like, Carter's already got this. Now he did say we got to see it in a game.
Sure.
Yeah.
He was complimentary though of that facet of his game.
To the beat writers prior to the start of practice today.
I was there. No, I was there. Len,
you talked to him, Paul?
Len, I was with that group of people.
Yeah, the two of us were standing right there.
We were there.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. All right, let me ask 2 quick questions. I'll take the answers off the air. How do you guys evaluate this draft and free agent class and the growth of it over the last 7 months? I was very pleased with the draft. I thought arguably they had the best draft of anybody in the NFL. I liked what we did in free agency. Maybe not as good as what we did in the draft, but I thought we made some progress in free agency, particularly in the defensive backfield. But how is it coming on? If I said to you, this was a top 25%, top 8 team in the NFL off season, not just on the names of the players, but on their growth over the season, would you rate it? Would you rate it that high? And the second thing is, I'd like you to speak to the idea of urgency. From January on, I felt there was a sense of urgency from Shane and Dable once the decision was made to bring them back. That was different than any other year that they've been here. And I think let me make a point about today. I think it got culminated today. Paul, you missed one line out of Dable's presser today. Not his presser, when he was talking to the team. And he referred to it, I guess, in his presser. He said, you better come back ready, because I'm not going to tolerate mistakes when you get back here. Can you confirm that that's what he said? And I'd like your answers to those 2 points.
All right, Len.
Thanks, guys.
We'll let you go on that note. Yep. Appreciate the phone call. I don't recall that exact thing. Did he state that maybe yesterday? I don't remember him saying that
those words
to
either.
The media.
The
that may have been elsewhere.
Today was that when you get back for training camp, there's not too much time before the season. There is a sense of urgency there.
Yeah,
that was his stress point today.
I don't remember him telling the media that I'm not going to accept mistakes.
No, I don't remember.
That would have stood out to me. Yeah, if he said that today, and I don't recall.
I'm going to look at his transcript. Go ahead, answer the rest of it.
In terms of the level of urgency for Joe Schoen and Brian Dable, to say that this is the most urgency they've shown compared to any other season, I think that's a bit of hyperbole speaking, just because of maybe the season they've come off of. I think that every year, especially the years where they did not make the playoffs, there has always been the mindset that the roster has to improve and they need to do the necessary heavy lifting. I think you're maybe assigning that label based on how good you feel about the players they brought in. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would separate the two. And if you even go back and look at the things they've said, how the process played out, I did not sense that there was a major difference in terms of urgency. Maybe deep down inside, a little bit more pressure, given the both of them are another year removed from when they were hired. I think that's natural, but I don't know if I would say that this year was any different in terms of the level of urgency. As far as how do you evaluate the last few months based on the players that were drafted and who were brought in free agency, well, I'll give you an example. Darius Alexander, for example, has been sidelined. So when you say, well, how do you evaluate the draft class? He's a part of the draft class. So if you can't really evaluate some of these players, and I'm just pinpointing him as an example, there's only so much you could take away from this period other than, to use the term Len insinuated, the names on the back of the jersey. So I just look at it as, can the guys build a rapport off the field? Can they, those that are new, can they get into the locker room? And is there a smooth transition from that standpoint? I think if you listen to most of the players, the Javon Hollands, for example, the Pulse of the Debos, it seems as if they're gelling quite well. It also helps, of course, that each one of them had a college teammate on the roster, too. Kayvon Thibodeau with Holland, and then Okereke with a Debo. And Jaxson Dart, how is he falling in line with the quarterback room? How is he adapting to becoming a professional? But those are non-X's and O's things. Those are the only things that I could truly evaluate. I'm not going to put an overwhelming amount into practice reps when there's no pads on and the pass rush can't battle the offensive line. So it's hard to give you tangible evidence on the field. I think anything that I look at as a positive step in the right direction is what we're hearing and perhaps seeing off the field with respect to the newbies.
I found the quote.
Oh, you did?
And
Okay.
I'll take part of it because it's a long paragraph.
Sure.
But part of what Dable said, quote, we can't lose that in the next 30 days. He was talking about the focus and the retention of what they've done. He says, in terms of our physical abilities, our techniques, our training methods, we have to come back. When training camp hits, I don't have much tolerance for mistakes during training camp. The season is getting close, so we have to be prepared mentally. We have to be prepared physically, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he did use the word mistakes in there.
Yeah. Okay.
But the point of it was, what he was really trying to emphasize, at least how I interpreted it, was that the timing factor. If you think you can slack off over the summer, you are going to slip backwards on July 22nd. Well, guess what? From July 22nd till August 9th, when you have your first preseason game, and then September, when you start your regular season, his point is, if you start falling behind, you can't catch up in time. He was, that was, to me, what he was trying to emphasize, is that before you know it, the season's here, and all of this learning stuff is fine, but you got to hit the ground running. When was it in the Indianapolis 500? Don't they drop a flag, or is it the lights when they start the race?
I think it's a flag.
It's a flag.
If I'm correct.
It's a flag. When they drop the flag, you got to go. And so this is the time where players are most apt to slip and fall behind schedule because they're going to be away for a month or so.
Green flag. Yes.
It is a green flag. I thought
Indianapolis
so.
500. Yep.
So that's what he was stressing as far as the way I interpreted what he was saying. Don't slip here because you can't really make it up.
And that's why I guess mistakes didn't pop out to me based on what Len mentioned, because, see, when I was listening to today, it didn't come off, and I'm not saying that Len was wrong in terms of his interpretation, but I guess what I was listening to Len describe, it came off as the tone was, I have no patience for any mistakes, and I'm going to throw your behind out of here if I see that. It didn't come across. I think the point that he was spelling out.
We were there and listened to him,
Exactly.
and we understood the inflection and the context
Correct.
of what he said.
Yeah.
Not a problem, Len.
No,
I get it. This is why it's hard so many times to read something in print and then fully get a grasp on what they were talking about.
Because you don't hear how they said it. Just like, for example, if somebody coaches, Coughlin was great at this, he'd use a sarcastic tone, right?
Wow.
If you read his quote and you didn't hear it in the sarcastic tone, you'd be like, what's he talking about? So that's why I guess when I was listening to what Len said commentary-wise, I wasn't matching up with what Dable had said. I don't know if you wanted to, one other thing, did you want to add? It was an interesting question. I responded to it about how you evaluate the growth of the draft class and the free agents, right? You're pretty much on the same page as me.
The question's irrelevant. It's a complete hypothetical. All I will say to you, Len, is that everything has been as advertised so far. If you want to use, and I'm not a golfer, but if you'd like to use a golf analogy, to this point, the Giants are shooting par. Okay? There is no such thing as going 6 under par at this point because there's no real competition. They're not on the field playing real games under real circumstances. So you can't shoot better than par. You can only shoot par right now, and that has to be good enough. What you can do is have guys come in, not be what they were advertised to be, making mental mistakes, doing stupid things, screwing up, not listening to the coaches, making repetitive mistakes, that's cardinal sin number 1.
Sure.
Making repetitive mistakes. And then, of course, not doing your homework and not the classwork down. Because remember, these OTAs, there's classwork involved in this too. We only see them on the field. There's classwork here too. When you don't do those things, you now double bogey. Okay? To use the golf terms. Again, I don't play golf, but double bogey's really bad, right?
That is,
yeah,
that's
bogey's
correct.
bad,
Yes.
double bogey's terrible.
Double bogey's no good.
Okay.
Triple bogey's even worse. Okay.
Is there such a thing as a triple bogey?
Well, trust me, if we took you out on the golf course, we would experience a few triple bogeys.
Oh,
so, yes.
Okay. Okay. So anyway.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Yes.
but that's the point.
Sure.
That's the point. Okay? Par is the best you can hope for. If everything is smooth, you're par, fine, take it for what it's worth. As long as you avoid the bogeys, the double bogeys, and the triple bogeys, that's the best you can hope for. And that's where the Giants are. They've avoided all the bogeys. All 3 of them.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, and that's why I said, I think, for example, the coaches would be able to better answer Jaxson Dart, how far he's come along from the time that he was drafted to now. But also, that's a very small timeline. So how much are you even going to read into that in terms of the growth and development?
Yeah.
And Abdul Qadir, even from listening to the defensive assistants, they'll speak very loudly and give high praise about his skill set, what they've seen come out of the draft. And at the end of the day, they have to keep their expectations in check because the pads are not on and the offensive linemen can only do so much to inhibit these players from getting into the backfield.
They can basically stand in front of them like a fire hydrant.
Exactly. So, I know Darius Alexander has been on the side, but Abdul Qadir, I could sit here and tell you, oh, he's looked good, the bend, the top of the rush, but it's against air at this point. So even that, you got to take a step back, even if you're once again overly excited. So it's very hard to say growth has occurred, whether it be from an X's and O's standpoint or from a mental standpoint. I think that's better answered after training camp when they'll have at least a month or so with the pads on. There'll be more to evaluate.
And do practices against the Jets.
Correct. And preseason games. So you'll actually have some action that is somewhat related, not identical, but somewhat related to what they'll see come the beginning of the regular season.
Kind of football.
Correct, yes. Much closer than what we're seeing now. I think we can leave it at that. All right. That is going to wrap up Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. A reminder again, no show tomorrow because it's Juneteenth. But then again, we'll be back on Friday, normal time at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, and then all throughout next week, normal time at 12:30 p.m. Eastern as well. A reminder, today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcasts, as we welcome you into the Giants podcast studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow saying so long here on BBKL. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We'll speak to you on Friday on Giants.com. Have a good one.